Hello ladies and gentlemen. It took a while because of Christmas, but here we are. Welcome back into the studio for the final few installments of our Patreon exclusive series on sculpting a half-life-size figure. These last few episodes, probably it's going to be 2 episodes, will be all about the portrait, so let's get to it. The first thing I do is to attempt to locate a point of truth, a place to start sculpting. By now, this concept must be somewhat familiar to you as it has repeated itself throughout the entire process. In order to make this simple, I have to use what I have established already to find a new point to work from. The length of the sternum, or the breastbone, from the solar plexus to the pit of the neck is more or less the same length as the length from pit of the neck to the ear hole. So this is a good place to start. Remember that I always try to solve one issue at a time, so first I want to find the height of the ear hole. I'm not yet concerned with left and right. Once I've placed the ear hole in height, I can deal with it from left and right. For now, I'm working from our original 4 views. So if you don't know what that is or what that means, I suggest you go back to episode 1 of this series and check it out, as where I observe from is the keystone of this entire process of sculpture. To place the ear hole, I use the side view and line it up vertically with something that has already been established. And in this case, from the right side of the sculpture, that's going to be the pit of the neck. Remember that as the head turns, the ear hole will line up vertically with different things on either side of the figure. Rotating the head as we have done here to the left a little bit brings the right ear forward and the left ear backwards. So the ear on either side will line up vertically with something different from either of our 2 original views. Finding the ear hole is a nice place to start because right behind the ear hole is the connection from the pit of the neck to the head, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's a major landmark when it comes to the neck, so it's good to have it in place. We now know where this muscle is headed, where it starts and where it needs to go. The turn of the head means that this muscle on one side becomes more upright while the other has more of an angle to it, more of a lean to it. As the head turns and the right ear is brought forward, the sternocleidomastoid muscle on that side becomes more vertical, and the opposite happens on the other side. We didn't locate the ear hole to only find out how the head connects to the body through the neck though. We found the ear hole for 2 more reasons, and let's start with the proportional one. The distance from the pit of the neck to the ear hole tends to be very similar to the distance from the ear hole to the top of the head. So by finding the ear hole in this way, means we've already will have a decent idea for where the top of the head is going to be. The same distance from pit of the neck to the ear hole corresponds closely with the distance from the ear hole to the front of the face. So we now have a decent idea of how far out we need the front of the face to be. And the same is true for the back of the head, the ear hole being close to the middle of the head on a horizontal plane. So we now also know more or less where the back of the head needs to end up. So a lot of proportional borders have been closed to solved for us already. It'll take me a little while to get to those borders, as you'll see, and smashing on a ton of clay to get there right away I think is a bad idea. But these borders will come into play as we close in on the overall dimensions of the head. Keep in mind that these proportional rules are generalizations and doesn't always hold true. We can't solely rely on them, unless we are sculpting from imagination, of course. But when sculpting from life or from photo reference, they are a decent starting point to consider at least, and from there, we must use our eyes to get the final level of accuracy that we are after. The second reason we found the ear hole is perhaps the most important one. Once we know the ear hole, we can with confidence begin to build the jaw. The jaw begins right in front of the ear, drops down more or less vertically before it turns horizontal and travels forward towards the chin. This brings me to perhaps the weirdest part of how I sculpt a portrait. This will seem really alien to some of you. As you'll see, I don't really worry or sculpt any width to begin with. I solely focus on the profile view or the side view of the face and deal with everything from the two profile views to begin with. Which leaves me with a head that looks a lot like a pancake from the front, very, very narrow. And so, why would I do this? This seems weird, but why would I do this? And there are many reasons for it. One of the biggest flaws with portraits are related to the depths from the front view. Now, as you might have heard me say, we can't really judge depth. You can't judge depth objectively. So we turn depth into left and right in order to judge it objectively. The depth of the face must therefore be dealt with from the profile view, where depth from the front view turns into left and right from the side view or the profile view. I want to deal with as few issues as possible at once, and from the profile view, I can deal with the heights of the face, I can deal with left and right, which are the depths from the front, and that's really all I want to worry about for now. That's a lot to deal with, and once dealt with, I can deal with the widths from the front and not worry about the other stuff too much, the depth, the up and down. From the profile view, the portrait has its most distinct individual features as well. Imagine seeing someone backlit, so their head is just a dark shadow shape essentially. Now from the front view, you will only see a roundish, egg-like shape, so a person is not going to be very easy to identify from this view. But from the profile, however, you will see exactly who it is, and it becomes very easy to identify the person. So while this probably is going to look very strange to most of you, for a long time here the sculpture is going to look very strange, remember that I'm simply trying to solve only a few issues at the same time. By adding width, we introduce more clay, which in turn means that once something relating to heights or left or right from the profile view needs to change, which it definitely will need to change at some point, we need to move a lot more clay. But if we have no widths, any change we need or want to make requires us to move very little clay, making changes much easier to swallow and making us much more likely to make said changes without hesitation. In order to correctly set up the depths of the face, or as I am seeing them and dealing with them right here, left and right from the profile view, I need to get the angle between the brow and the chin correctly. This angle changes depending on the position of the head, and it's important to get it right in order to solidify the pose of your head. The angle between the chin and the brow is very important because we often misunderstand the relationship between the upper and lower part of the face. A very common mistake that I see is beginning sculptors making the bottom of the face, that's everything underneath the nose, sit too far back in relationship to the upper part from the side views. Now this leads to an avalanche of issues. Correctly setting up the relationship between brow and chin solves a ton of issues early on. Keep in mind that the relationship between chin and brow will change depending on the position of the head, so if you work with a live model, make sure the angle between the brow and the chin corresponds with the angle of the ear to make sure the model is in the same position as your sculpture is in. It's a typical mistake that we see as well. Beginning sculptors, or even experienced sculptors sometimes, sculpt one part of the face in one position, only to have your live model move slightly, and now you'll sculpt the next part of the face in a different position. And this obviously leads to issues. By paying close attention to the angle between the brow and the chin will help you solve this issue. Always double check this angle before you start a new session, and check it a couple of times during a session just to be sure, especially if you're working with a live model. A lot of issues with planes and volumes can be solved by having the correct relationship between the upper and the lower part of the face. Notice how I draw a lot on the surface of the clay. Drawing is super important as it allows you to explore potential solutions without committing to them with lots of clay, which require a lot of work. Often enough, however, people hesitate too much and simply draw on the surface, which leads them nowhere. You'll never know what it is that you've halfway built until you commit to it a little bit with clay. So first I draw on the clay, I step back and look and make adjustments that needs to be made to the drawing. And believe me, there's always adjustments that needs to be made to the drawing. Once I feel good about the drawing, I commit to it with clay. And at this point, I'm drawing with the clay. And this forces the realization of my decisions, which brings my sculpture closer to the finish line. You don't want to be one of those people who simply hesitate throughout the entire process. Now, you want to proceed with caution, but you also want to proceed with confidence. You want to make sure you can proceed with confidence, and that's where drawing comes in. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and I hope to see you in the next one.